how are households as SMEs doing? And if we look on the left side where we just show the physical access to finance, we see that about half of the Caribbean countries are underserved, quote unquote, when compared to lack. So this just measures how easy is it for me to access a banking point, to access some sort of an agent that performs banking services. And one caveat about this measure, and this is a measure we use because it's widely available, one caveat is that in the Caribbean countries, because there is a large amount of ATMs often in tourism sites, it brings out the question of concentration. While there are a large number of ATM access points, they might be concentrated in very urban areas and very touristy areas, but it doesn't mean, for example, that rural access is good. And for example, a model that has been vastly used in smaller Latin American countries, the banking agent model, where, for example, a little corner shop takes on banking services and you can go there and cash your checks and deposit your money. That model hasn't been developed much in the Caribbean. On the right-hand side chart, we now look at SMEs. And once again, we see that about half, slightly more here, of SMEs in the region say that access to credit is a major constraint to their business. And this, we're going to unpack it next. And this is basically, we're looking at about like 1/3 at least in each country will cite access to credit as a major issue. On the next slide, we now unpack to why through what channels some of these constraints are working. So we have high loan deposit spreads, as I mentioned before. For the Caribbean countries that we bring into the analysis, just about all of them, except for Bahamas, have a loan deposit spread which is about double or more that of what we see in advanced economies. We're not saying that it should be the same as advanced economies, but this signals that there might be some scope to lowering this, or at least examining what might be driving these high loan deposit spreads. On the center chart, we have the levels of collateral. And the Caribbean, it's not just that there are very high levels of collateral required behind each loan, it's also that often the definition of collateral is very narrow. So things like working capital might not be accepted as collateral. Factoring and leasing are still very not developed in the region. So it's not just the levels that we show here, but often it also tends to be the definition of collateral. And all of this ends, we see that it leads to firms having low access to credit. So once again, about 1/3 of the firms at least report having no access to banking credit. And in the work that we have done, we actually find that it's not a lack of demand. What we see is that very often these companies end up in the World Bank Enterprise Survey, they openly say that they borrow from family and friends, they borrow from informal channels. So it's not that there is no demand, it's just that there seems to be a lack of banking access.